Doug makes up for about 3, 5, maybe 18 mock drafts that he promised the people but never delivered on. That's all coming up today, along with some lottery talk and if PJ Washington playoff performances bother you or not. Locked On Hornets coming up soon.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and we're available anywhere you get your podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We always appreciate FanDuel for supporting the show. I'm going to stall just a little bit longer until I get this script up and ready to read to the people. FanDuel, thank you once more. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. And there's Doug Branson, where you can catch his work on his Substack, EveryHornetsBoxscore.com. There you can also find his subtext information. You also got to see him go solo over the weekend during the lottery, and you got to see the Bleacher Report stream. How'd it go, Doug?
I thought it went well. Bleacher Report, fantastic organization there, and I'm waiting on the paycheck.
It always comes down to the paycheck. Well, it does feel, I don't know if it feels like this for you. When was the last time we did a show together? Was it Friday? Was it Thursday? I called in, I guess, on Friday, right?
Yeah.
It's been a while since. It feels longer. When you do this thing every day, if you wait 5 days, then it really feels like 15 since we've done a show together conventionally doing the YouTube thing.
Listen, it's the off season. Things are crazy. They've hired a head coach. They've hired a lot of assistant coaches. We're going to get to that tomorrow. They've hired a new president, another president, not a vice president, but an actual president. We'll get to that tomorrow. But there's so much to talk about, and you and I have been all over the place. You've been on golf courses, storms, everything's been happening in Charlotte right now. So we're trying to pull it all together. And we haven't even gotten to the finish our jersey number. Best players in each jersey number. Like it's going to get even crazier as this offseason continues.
Every position is a new one over at the Hornets organization. Every person in that position is new, and we will talk about all of it and we will update you on it. So as we're trying to organize what the most important stuff is, I guess the draft pick is pretty important and where you're selecting in this selection process. And the Hornets, they get the 6th overall pick after the lottery is over and done with. They fall a couple of spots, but, Doug, it feels like to me, nobody really cares with this draft. Last year, if you fall out of the top 5, that's a big deal because you have Tier 1 solely belonging to Wemby. Tier 2 was the great Brandon Miller Scooter Henderson. Scooter.
We got an ER. You got an ER there.
I like Scooter. That was that debate for Tier 2. Then you had the Thompson twins, and then if you fell out of the top 5, that was a big deal. Here, Stephon Castle could go 2, or he could be there at 6. Same thing with Klingon. I just don't care. It doesn't feel like anybody else really cares. Sure, would I rather have the 2nd overall pick? Yes. Am I okay with the 6th overall pick in this particular draft? Absolutely, and it feels like other people feel the same way.
I'll take your word for it. You've got the pulse of the fan base there at WFNZ. You've got the callers calling in and the line, the text line.
The text line's famous. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what the deal is with the fan base. So I'll take your word for it because what I've seen are just a few people who are, again, leaning on the trauma that this fan base has been put through for going on 2 decades plus now of bad lottery luck, of bad draft luck, and maybe some bad luck of their own making. And so anytime the Hornets fall, despite the fact that, a couple of drafts ago, they moved to the 3 spot to take LaMelo Ball.
Yeah.
Last year, they moved up to go to 2. Yeah, they didn't get Wemby, but they moved up to number 2 to get Brandon Miller. And so it seems like things are moving in the right direction, and yet anytime they fall, there's going to be some like, here we go, Hornets again. Even though Detroit got it worse. Detroit they had almost a Bob Katsian level 7-59 type of season, And they fell 4 spots, and the Hornets only fell 3.
It did 2 years in a row where Detroit fell. And so the message for Detroit is loud and clear. Stop tanking. Try to win just a little bit. Which, to be fair, I think Detroit actually thought they would take a step up this season.
They always do. They literally always think that. That is the most hilarious part. And it's not because of injury. You know, the Hornets have thought that now for 2 seasons now, but that was because of injury. With Detroit, it's just being pathetic.
It's being bad. They're young. God, they're young. And I say that, but now you have some guys coming into their like 3rd and 4th year. It's not like they have a whole bunch of 1st and 2nd year players on their team, even though they got some of those. Either way, you're right. The Hornets, they do fall, but this is how I think about it too, Doug. Maybe we can build in some good karma. We can't have a move up in the draft every year. So you have LaMelo at number 3, and then what is it? The next couple of years, I guess you settle around where you're supposed to select, and then you move up to go get Brandon Miller. 2 picks, by the way. When the Hornets do have lottery luck, and I actually think this extends back to when they were picking Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Baron Davis. When they do have the lottery luck, man, they make the most of it, which is not a small thing for this franchise. So it looks like they did it with Brandon. It looks like they did it with LaMelo because they just took the guy that fell to them. And even if they don't move up in this draft, it's okay because maybe we can get some good karma for us next year. But what are you thinking, Doug?
I'm thinking that it gives the Hornets a little bit more freedom to take a swing. If they want to take a swing with the 6th pick, if they want to reach a little bit and fall in love with a guy, they've got more freedom to do that. Because if you're at 1 and you don't take Sarr or you don't take Ricochet, and you go for like an Anthony Bennett type pick, and it doesn't work out. By the
way, Ricochet is how we're saying it now. Is that the correct pronunciation?
I'm fairly certain. I looked this up. And
I have no clue. That was not rhetorical. That is a information seeking question. Thank you for letting me know.
Oui. So that's what I think is that it gives them more freedom to take a swing. That's number 1, or freedom to move the pick, because even though I think that had they gotten the number 1 overall selection, it would have given them more leverage to trade that pick. If they had moved up to 2, for example, if they'd gone from 3 to 2 or even stayed at 3, I think when you're top 3, there's just a pressure to like actually make that pick. And if you trade it, you better trade for something really great. But with 6, they could, I think now the possibility of them packaging multiple picks together for a star, that drops. But the likelihood that they move back from 6 to 15 or 6 even back into the 20s and leverage that to acquire more future picks that they could then use maybe next season or the season after that to add a like, you know, all-star or all-NBA caliber player, I think the chances of that actually increase.
Totally agree. I have 3 points on it. 1, it feels like it puts you in the Dalton Connect territory where if you were at number 2, then you would feel like it's a reach, and that's a lot of pressure. But at 6, that's fine, and it makes more sense there. 2, now, Doug, if somebody falls to you at number 6, it doesn't feel like there's anything really wrong with that player. It just feels like the other teams valued somebody differently than maybe we expected because of how chaotic this is going to be. This does not feel like a Malik Monk fall or a Noah Vonleh fall because, they were always projected to go up here. They fell to us. What's going on? I don't know. Okay, we'll take them. Same thing with James Bouknight. We've been burned by that a bunch. Now, if they fall, it's just because it seems like the other team values a different type of player because there is no consensus number 3. I mean, it could be all across the board. So that's the other point. And third, I think this is a big one. I think this is the biggest question that we have going into the NBA draft. If you draft Donovan Clingan at 6, that just means, hey, we took the best player available. He fell to us. We feel like he's the best. Oh, well. If you drafted Clingan at 2 or 3, I wonder if that is a public statement. We don't trust Mark Williams at all. You could still gather that a little bit if they 6, but not nearly as much. Like you can hide behind that a lot more, in my opinion. So I think those are 3 points as to kind of going in that neighborhood of what you were talking about that makes a big deal for the Hornets.
Yeah, I think it's almost a guarantee at this point that someone that is right now projected in the mock drafts in like the 15 to 20 range is going to jump up and be a top 5 pick. Like it just feels like one of these where someone in the top 5 is going to take a swing before it ever gets to the Hornets. So I think the Hornets at 6 are going to have a couple of players that they didn't expect to be there at 6, and they're going to have a couple of options, maybe that they could take a swing on. So you're right. I think all of the options are on the table, and that's why I'm so excited to dig into these mock drafts, baby, because I got to catch up.
Do you want a teaser in the first segment, or do you just want to go and rapid fire in the second segment?
Nah, rapid fire, baby. Okay. I got them all. I'm going to machine gun mock draft is what they call me.
Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
That's what they call me.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Guys, there's a lot of mock drafts that he's going to get to. I mean, we're not kidding when we say rapid fire. And everybody is making sure they get their post-lottery mock draft out there. So we got the big boys, too. Not just some third, fourth, millionth website that you're trying to figure out.
Those are coming.
Those will be there for sure, but not here. We got a lot of mock drafts to get to coming up next. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, especially for the Canes fans that also like the Hornets. Canes are still alive, baby. They win another game, so maybe we have a 3-0 comeback. We'll see. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, even more than that. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
Welcome back into Locked On Hornets. Some technical difficulties mean that you are stuck with me, but you're stuck with me and a ton of mock drafts because here is what happened. I, once again, overpromised and underdelivered. I've been working on swapping those two things, underpromising and overdelivering. But this one is not my fault, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I have a baby. And number two, the Hornets took their time on hiring a head coach. And so we were sort of laser focused. Welcome back into the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. Some technical difficulties mean that Walker had to skip on to his WFNZ show from 12 to 3, meaning that you are now stuck with me, but you are stuck with me and an entire handful of mock drafts. Why? Because once again, I've under-delivered and overpromised. I said that I would give you a mock draft every single show leading up to the NBA draft, and here's what happened. Okay, this is not my fault. Once again, not my fault. This is the fault of my baby. Number one, I have a baby. Number two, the baby takes a lot of focus, okay? Number two, the Hornets took their time hiring a head coach. They finally landed on one. I think it's a good one, Charles Lee, and we've got to talk about some of the assistants that they've hired as well. That's coming up tomorrow. But they took their time, and then we got laser focused on the search, and it took my eye off the ball that was the NBA draft until this lottery happened. And then once the lottery happens and you know where the Hornets are going to land, then all of a sudden all the big boys start firing off mock drafts with the order locked in. And so now what I have for you is a ton of mock drafts, and I'm going to start with CBS.com. Actually, no, I'm not going to start with CBS. I'm going to start with the consensus mock draft from NBA.com. And that will lead us into a number of mock drafts that may go along with the consensus, or they may break out of that consensus. We're going to start with NBA.com, and they say that the consensus is the Charlotte Hornets will select, with the 6th pick in the NBA draft, Stephon Castle out of UConn, the shooting guard that we are unsure can shoot effectively from outside, hit some clutch shots, but can he be a consistent, 35% plus three-point shooter in the NBA? A lot of question marks here, but NBA.com writes, we'll do what needs to be done, whatever it is, whichever end of the floor. A move on the ball could unlock another level. And you got to love that, whichever end of the floor, because look, they've just hired a head coach in Charles Lee, who is a defensive specialist. He, like Steve Clifford before him, wants to deliver a defensive identity to a team that has lacked it, even going back through the Borrego era. Borrego did a lot of things to unlock the offense, But when it came down to it, when it came down to play-in basketball, they were an absolute sieve on defense and were letting anything through and got blown out in those 2 play-in games. And so you need to establish some kind of defensive toughness here with this team. And I don't know necessarily that they have all of the personnel necessary to do that, even if they were to remain completely healthy. So trying to address that one question, both ends of the floor, in this draft, Stephon Castle would be a good name to watch. So that's the consensus. Let's move on to some other mock drafts. So I've got one here from Kristen Peak from yahoo.com. Let's see. Consensus? No consensus? She goes consensus. Stephon Castle is her pick. She writes, Castle was incredible during the NCAA tournament. The 6'6" guard, we think 6'6", right? There were some measurement questions at the NBA Combine. Looked like some wrong numbers were released for Castle. Trying to figure out what those right numbers are. I think they were listing him at 6'2", and then it was like, no, that's not him. That's another player. So a little confusion around here, but Kristen Peak has him at 6'6". The 6'6" guard delivered under pressure on the biggest stage in college basketball, particularly in the Final Four. In his last 2 games against Alabama and Purdue, Castle averaged 18 points and 5 rebounds. He is one of the best defending guards in the draft class and consistently smothered some of the best guards as a freshman this past season. He was one of the biggest risers during the tournament and is now a projected top 5 pick. So then if Kristen has him as a top 5 pick, he would have to fall. And we got some news about Nikola Topic, who is also a projected top 5 pick, sustaining another injury. And it doesn't look like it's a major injury, but it doesn't look minor either. And so, could Topic fall out? Does Stephon Castle rise back into the top 5? We'll kind of have to see there. Okay, moving on. I got to get to all these mock drafts here. Next one, Kyle Boone, CBS. Consensus? No consensus? He's going away from the consensus. He has the Hornets selecting Matisse Buzelis, the small forward. In a league dominated by power wings with big frames, Charlotte swings once again for a huge upside prospect in Buzelis to pair with point guard LaMelo Ball and 2023 number 2 pick Brandon Miller. Buzelis has a huge frame and immense potential to grow into a versatile forward who can dribble, pass, and shoot. Look, if Buzelis was once a consensus number 1 pick, like a year or 2 ago, it looked like everybody was going to fail us for Buzelis. And he slipped back with the rise of Sarr and Zachary Risache and some others. But look, if Buzelis is there at 6, that might even tempt me a little bit more than Stephon Castle, and here's why. Because Castle, whether he's 6'2", 6'4", 6'6", is not going to be as tall as Brandon Miller. So if you ultimately have this idea of playing all 3 of them together, Ball, Castle, and Miller, that means you're moving Miller to the 3. And is that necessarily something you want to do? It didn't seem like that was something that Clifford wanted to do. It seemed like Clifford had visions of, building a Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics. Hey, Charles Lee, Boston Celtics assistant head coach, about to be our head coach. Building that kind of roster where you've got 6'9", starting at the shooting guard position and moving up to the center position. So that would be a downgrade. Now, if you see Stephon Castle as sort of a Josh Hart, which is what Wasserman has him as in terms of a comp, if you see him as that kind of guy, as like a Swiss Army knife, tool, role player off the bench, then maybe you're not as concerned about the height situation. But if you're projecting him out to be a starter, that could be an issue. But Buzelis, no issues there. As you just heard Kyle Boone say, that's a big frame. That's a big guy, and he's only going to get bigger. And so if he can dribble, pass, shoot, if he can do all 3 of those things, that's tempting. Is not not going to help you as much on the defensive end of the floor, but he has the size to do it. If he's willing to dedicate himself to that end of the floor and doesn't want to be an absolute all-NBA player on the offensive end of the floor, then then you've got potential there. Buzelis, to me, has star potential. Stephon Castle does not. Stephon Castle has high-level role player potential. Buzelis, I think, I don't think he's going to be there at 6, but Kyle Boone does. He has him in the latest mock draft going to the Charlotte Hornets. Moving on, a few more here before we get to the third segment. I mentioned Wasserman from Bleacher Report. Jonathan Wasserman has Stephon Castle as a Josh Hart comp, and not a bad comp. I mean, Josh Hart doing good things for the Knicks right now in the playoffs. Does Wasserman have the Charlotte Hornets taking Stephon Castle? He does. Stephon Castle going to the Hornets at 6. Wasserman writes, the Charlotte Hornets will value Stephon Castle's secondary playmaking, physicality attacking the rim, and outstanding defensive toughness. With LaMelo Ball returning and Brandon Miller entering his second year, they may be able to afford to play a limited shooter like Castle. Castle's going to have some work to do to prove doubters wrong about his shooting, because I don't think he's going to come in and prove that he's going to be a dead-eye shooter, but that he can be a competent shooter on that end, that he's not going to be, a Dennis Smith Jr., Bryce McGowan's level sort of, gravity suck towards the middle of the floor for an opposing defense, that he can hit a three when left open with somewhat consistent, so some kind of consistency. That's what he has to prove here. And if he doesn't do it in the early draft period, it might guarantee that the Hornets are able to take him at 6. If he proves it a little too much, then that may take him into the top 5. So it's sort of a dangerous game that you're playing there. But he does make a point. If the Hornets want to contend this season and they take Stephon Castle, then they're either going to have to hope that Micic, Mann, some of these pieces that they added improve their three-point shot, or they're going to have to look at free agency or trades to add some shooting to this team. Ball being healthy will go a long way into helping that. Brandon Miller continuing to work on his shooting will help that. I don't know if you bring back Miles Bridges. He didn't shoot the three ball particularly well this past season. He can get hot from there for sure on any given night. But, consistency-wise, his three-point shot wasn't exactly there. So they may need to add something if they look at Stephon Castle. One final mock draft here from ESPN.com. Jonathan Gavoni, Phony Gavoni. I don't know about this guy, folks, but he's not going with consensus. He's not going Stephon Castle. He's going the other UConn guy, Donovan Clingan, the center. And he writes, with Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations Jeff Peterson in the front office and new head coach Charles Lee, the Hornets have the flexibility to take multiple directions, considering the roster's makeup and the longer timetable that comes with an organizational refresh and new ownership. Going to pause here. That's kind of interesting, right? Is this an organization in a full rebuild mode, or does it want to compete as early as next season? A lot of the things that they do in this draft, I think, will start to signal that. Do they go take a big swing on a prospect at 6, or do they bring in somebody like Clingan or even Castle that can contribute immediately, that was a college star? Do they look international? Do they look at project? Do they look at a guy that you're going to have to develop for multiple years? There's not going to be as much pressure to play a guy at 6 in a weak draft as there would be at 1, 2, or 3. There are a few benefits to dropping down to 6. Not many, but there are a few. And, you're not going to have to pay this guy you will have to pay him a significant amount. Lottery picks make good money, but not first overall pick. They're like $11, $12 million a year. Yeah, that's a big piece of your roster at that point, especially on a young team. So there's going to be more pressure to play that guy immediately. But with Clingan, you get a lot of size, you get defense, you get playmaking. Because look, Mark Williams can do a lot of things on the defensive end. He can't shoot. And, we've seen flashes of a guy who can play make, but I think that would be sort of third tier, fourth tier on what he can do. Block shots, scoring inside effectively without turning it over. Those are the kind of skills that you would look at first. But Clingan is a guy very similar to sort of Mason Plumlee and Spencer Hawes before him, guys that could play make, at the center position. The Hornets haven't had many of those guys. And I saw Clingan, too, at the Combine dropping some three-point shots. So was Zach Edey. I don't know if Zach Edey jumps into this conversation all of a sudden. We'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. But, if they want to continue to upgrade the center position, they also have some flexibility in the contract situation with Nick Richards, right? That's a very tradable contract that you could use on the trade market to upgrade wing defense with a veteran that is going to be a sure bet, as opposed to Stephon Castle, who you are gambling a little bit that could be an immediate contributor. You could bring in somebody that is a bit more of a known quantity if you trade that Nick Richards contract. But you're not going to do that unless you're bringing in somebody like Clingan or Edey, later on in the draft if he doesn't climb. Then you're not going to do that unless you're sure that you can bring in some depth at that position, I would think. So there's your mock draft rundown. Whew, that was a lot of mock drafts. I'm still not caught up. I still think I have like 3 or 4 more, but don't you worry. I'm going to get us caught up and get back on this mock draft train. More ahead here on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
PJ Washington. He's doing things in the NBA playoffs on a national stage for the Dallas Mavericks. Fun series, and PJ Washington leading the Dallas Mavericks in scoring. Look, didn't see that coming. Just going to say that off the bat. But how should we feel about it? Should we feel distraught? Should we feel angry? Should we feel sad? We'll get into our feelings next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get into the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You can pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. NHL postseason also happening right now. You can get in on that action as well. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron. Caitlin Clark's about to get it going, I think tonight. Indiana Fever open up their season. You can add her to your list as well. Connor McDavid and Jude Bellingham, all in the same entry. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Want to play alongside some of PrizePicks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. So, download the app today, PrizePicks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, all lowercase, smush it together, LOCKEDONNBA, for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, first deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Back here, final segment on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day, for subscribing on YouTube, for subscribing on your favorite podcast app. We really appreciate all the support that the fans are showing us right now as we get deep into this off season, and it's going to be a third straight extremely important offseason. New cast of characters, though. I think that's what makes it different. I've been saying most important offseason now of what it feels like for the past 5 years, okay? But this is a new cast of characters, so it's at least going to be a lot different. And with these new hires, you can be sure of that, including Jeff Peterson as the GM. And one of the things that is different about this team is just the roster makeup, and that's because of the trade deadline. They traded Terry Rozier. They traded Gordon Hayward to the Oklahoma City Thunder. By the way, where's that guy? They're not playing him. That's weird. You trade Trey Mann, you trade Micic, you trade Bertans, and you trade for Gordon Hayward, and you don't play him in the playoffs. I know there's going to be a lot of I told you so's out there. I certainly didn't see it coming. I thought, hey, they're trading for a veteran. I didn't think he would be like the star of the show. Obviously, that's Holmgren, that's SGA, that's all the other guys that they've got going on there, but man, I just did not see him falling completely out of the rotation. I don't understand what OKC was doing there. It's like you walk into like some rich person's house and you go, hey, yeah, that's a nice vase there. And they're like, you like it? Take it. I've got 16 of them. Like, what was OKC? Like, what was Sam Presti doing? You like that Trey Man? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I got 15 of them. Don't worry about it. Just take that. Micic, you want Micic too? Go ahead. Like, it's weird. Like, I'm in Presti. I'll just say that. I don't know how they did it, but I'm in Presti. Okay, so PJ Washington was also one of the players. He goes to Dallas. The Hornets get a first-round pick back. But the Hornets fans also have to watch PJ Washington in these playoffs score 20-plus points per game for the Dallas Mavericks, lead them in scoring more than Luka Doncic, scoring way more than Kyrie Irving. And they also have to hear national media pundits make the observation that players like Rozier, Kelly Oubre, not like Gordon Hayward, but players leave the Hornets and they go on to other teams. Malik Monk, they go on to other teams and they play really well. I think that's a little bit of a misconception. You have to, if you dig around a little bit, you see Malik Monk, had to go to LA, play with LeBron, had to make a transformation in his own game. And then, he goes on to be a success in Sacramento. And if you look at PJ Washington in Dallas, he is benefiting from some playoff chess right now. And the playoff chess is Oklahoma City is doing everything they can to take away Kyrie Irving. And they're even letting Luka Doncic do a little Luka. They've decided, hey, we're going to take away Kyrie Irving. We're going to frustrate this guy. We're going to be in this guy's shirt, triple team him. Been open shots for PJ Washington. To his credit, he's knocking them down, and he's rebounding. How should you feel about that? Well, look, you can feel sad. I don't think you should feel angry. The Hornets got a first-round pick. It's not like he walked away for nothing. Then I think you would have every right to be like, what is this organization doing letting a player of PJ Washington's caliber go for nothing? PJ Washington, at the end of the day, if the Hornets are able to turn multiple first-round picks into an all-star or all-NBA level player, then we'll look back on the PJ Washington trade and the Rozier trade as sacrifices that unfortunately had to be made. That honestly should have been made years ago. That's what I feel angry about, is that if they had done some things that they needed to do and gone into the tax, traded for some players, then PJ Washington could be a role player scoring 20-plus points per game on a Hornets team. But he was never given that opportunity because they kept investing in, late lottery picks that take time to develop and often don't develop into star players. And as PJ Washington is showing you in Dallas, you need to play with star players to look like that as a role player in the playoffs. And so, we got inklings of who PJ Washington was when he was scoring 40-plus against Oklahoma City. Like, he just tortures Oklahoma City, number one, so let's just put that out there. But it was that we saw that led to the first-round pick being delivered from Dallas in the first place. So obviously he was good. If he was trash, you wouldn't have gotten a first-round pick back for him. You wouldn't have gotten a first-round pick back for him. Okay? So here's how I think you should feel about it. I don't know whether it's Charles Lee being hired and coming in and talking about competitiveness and just being fired up to be here, them hiring a new general manager, hiring a new president, remaking the staff. It's got me fired up. It's got me hopeful. And it's got me ready to put my big boy pants on and say, all right, the past is the past. Let's give this new ownership group an opportunity to show that they're willing to do the things that are necessary to move this roster in the right direction. The things that Sacramento has done, the things that Indiana has done, the things that Minnesota has done. Those franchises have looked at the situation, the NBA landscape, and said, we're not afraid of Boston. We're not afraid of LA. We're a mid-market team, and we're going to go out there and do the thing. We're going to take the risks so that we can make a playoff roster. And if this organization is willing to do that, then I'm willing to backseat some of the trauma that I've experienced and quit whining about what happened during the Bobcats years and during the second iteration of the Hornets years. And I hope they let go of the nostalgia too. Like, let's drop the 90s starter jacket nostalgia and let's start talking about what they're going to do to build a new Hornets thing that you can remember 20 years from now or 30 years from now or 35 years from now. I'm tired of celebrating anniversaries. I'm tired of talking about the 90s. I'm even tired of talking about Jamal Mashburn and Baron Davis and the early aughts teams. I'm tired of talking about it. I want to talk about a team that's making the playoffs right now. And so I'm also tired of being angry about players going and being good elsewhere because there's reasons for it. And so I'm hopeful that the Hornets can start to have role players that play well here and play well in the playoffs. And it starts by a defensive identity. And so, we'll see if they look at Castle. We'll see if they look at Klingon. I think that, it kind of takes guys like Dillingham off the table. There are a few offensive-only pieces that I think are going to be excluded from the draft conversation. It would be a surprise if the Hornets took that player at 6. But we'll continue to analyze the NBA draft and these new hires that they made. What do they mean? We've got Lamar Skeeter from Utah. We've got Josh Longstaff from the Chicago Bulls. We'll dig into their resumes and what it means as the staff continues to build here in Charlotte. And hopefully the excitement for Hornets basketball continues to build. I'm certainly excited. I'm excited that you're a part of this show. Thank you so much for listening, for continuing to hang with us. For Walker, he'll be back tomorrow. And David Walker is going to be on the show tomorrow as well. For the whole family here at Locked On Hornets, I'm saying go Hornets, go America. Let's swarm Charlotte.